99% of human history was lived exactly like this: hunting at sunrise, sleeping under stars, no borders, no ownership, no screens. For most of humanity, that world ended thousands of years ago. For a handful of communities across Africa, it never did. This film is about the last of them, and about what we lost when we stopped living this way. The dry soil of the Lake Eyasi Basin, situated near the steep walls of the Rift Valley and the fossil-rich grounds of Olduvai Gorge, holds deep layers of human history. Nearby, the Laetoli footprints, preserved in volcanic ash for over 3.6 million years, show where early hominins once walked. Today, this same savanna is inhabited by the Hadzabe, a population of fewer than 1,300 people who represent some of the last hunter-gatherers on the planet. Their survival relies on a complete absence of food production. They do not plant crops, keep livestock, or build permanent dwellings. Their camps are seasonal, shifting with the rains and the migration of wild game. Within these groups, authority is completely decentralized. There are no chiefs, no formal councils, and no binding rules. Decisions are reached through informal consensus, and because they do not accumulate food or possessions, they have no concept of land ownership. For decades, researchers have studied the Hadzabe to understand human origins. Genetic analyses suggest their lineage represents one of the deepest branches in the human family tree, with an isolation period extending back more than 100,000 years. This ancient heritage is mirrored in their speech. Hadzane, spoken by only about 1,000 people, is a linguistic isolate with more than 30 distinct click consonants, completely unrelated to any other language spoken today. They are a highly specialized population. Their social structures, linguistic traditions, and ecological knowledge have been refined over thousands of years to thrive in an environment that others find unlivable. At dawn, the acacia woodland is quiet. Hadzabe hunters move through the dry brush, their steps making no sound on the parched earth. They do not speak. Instead, they coordinate using a complex vocabulary of hand gestures and soft whistles, a silent language developed over generations of tracking game. Behind the men, boys as young as 5 and 6 follow closely. There are no classrooms here. Education is woven directly into the walk. The children watch the angle of a broken twig, the footprint in the dust, and the behavior of the birds. A sharp repeating call breaks the silence. It is the greater honey guide, a wild bird that actively seeks out human partners. The bird flies in a zigzag pattern from branch to branch, leading the hunters to a wild beehive high in a baobab tree. The men climb, use smoke to calm the bees, and extract the comb. After harvesting the honey, they leave a portion of larvae and beeswax on the ground, a deliberate exchange that sustains this interspecies partnership. Back in the temporary camp, there is no hoarding. Whatever the hunters bring home, whether honey or bushmeat, is divided equally among everyone present. In this society, food is consumed immediately, and prestige comes from giving, not accumulating. This cooperative existence has survived despite decades of outside pressure. Since Tanzanian independence in 1961, the government has tried to permanently settle the Hadzabe 6 times, attempting to turn them into farmers. Each time, the community chose the forest. They walked back to the savanna, refusing to abandon a system of knowledge that has kept them alive for thousands of years. North of the Rift Valley Lakes, where the Mago and Omo rivers carve through southwestern Ethiopia, lives the Mercy community, numbering approximately 8,000 people. Their most distinct visual tradition is also the most misunderstood by outsiders. Around the age of 15, a young woman may choose to begin the depinya process. A small incision is made in her lower lip, which is gradually stretched over several months using clay or wooden plugs of increasing size. The final plates, crafted from local clay or carved from wood, are polished to a smooth finish. measuring anywhere from 3 to 10 centimeters in diameter. This practice is not an act of coercion, but an individual decision. The plait is an expression of beauty, identity, and maturity, signaling adulthood and elevating her social standing within her clan. A larger plait often reflects a higher bride price, representing a symbolic recognition of her family's status and her own readiness to manage a household. But culture is never static, and modern pressures are rewriting these ancestral codes. Today, proximity to the secondary schools in Jinka, the arrival of mobile phones, and the rise of cultural tourism are reshaping these choices. Many young women now choose to forego the plate entirely, prioritizing formal education and new economic paths. For this rising generation, self-expression is found not in physical modification, but in their own independent voice. The generation of women currently wearing the depinya may well be the last. As younger Mercy adapt to the modern world, they are proving that cultural survival does not require freezing in time, but deciding for themselves what to carry forward. In the dry grass of the lower Omo Valley, social order is negotiated through cattle, conflict, and memory. For generations, young men have entered the arena of the Ka ceremony, carrying 2-meter wooden sticks known as dongas. These ceremonial duels are not spectacles of violence, but highly structured trials of endurance used to settle community disputes, establish masculine rank, and compete for marriage alliances. Yet, the tools of prestige are shifting. Over the past decade, the arrival of AK-47 rifles has altered traditional life. Once a tool of protection, the firearm is increasingly seen alongside or in place of the donga as a primary symbol of wealth and influence, a transition that concerns community elders who warn it erodes customary mediation. True wealth, however, remains rooted in the pastoral world. The Mercy maintain an intimate kinship with their herds, decorating prized cattle with kola, metal rings and beads affixed to horns, and scarifying their skins with patterns that encode ancestral lineages. This relationship is also one of survival. The Mercy diet revolves around a thick sorghum porridge called taish, sustained by milk and cattle blood drawn during ritual gatherings. Because the Mercy have no written language, their entire legal system, historical record, and ecological knowledge exist only in the air. Elders carry this spoken memory, transmitting generations of wisdom through oral storytelling and song. As infrastructure and external ranching encroach on their customary pastures, this oral archive faces the quiet pressure of a modern world, demanding they write their history down. In the dry expanses of the Kunene region in northern Namibia, the earth shifts from the arid skeleton coast toward the Angolan border. Here, approximately 50,000 Himba people live within a territory defined by environmental severity. This harsh, semi-arid environment historically acted as a natural barrier, keeping European colonial settlers at bay and preserving a way of life that has remained continuous for generations. This endurance is visibly written on the body. Himba women gather red ochre, grinding the hematite into a fine powder before blending it with clarified butterfat. This rich aromatic paste, known as OTGs, is applied daily to the skin and hair. In an environment of intense ultraviolet radiation and scarce water, OTGs serves as a protective physical shield. It locks in moisture, deters biting insects, and cleanses the skin without the need for washing. The resulting deep copper-red hue is a practical adaptation to the desert, signaling a deep connection to the earth and ancestral blood. Alongside this protective barrier, hair functions as a tactile system of social information. The braids and plaits are carefully styled to communicate personal history. A single braid indicates a young girl, while 2 parallel braids signal marriage. A third plait is added after the birth of a first child. These hairstyles, taught by grandmothers to young children, are a visual code, allowing any member of the community to read another's age, rank, and family history at a single glance. In this corner of the desert, identity is not kept in records, but carried openly on the body. At the center of every Himba village burns the Okuruwo, the sacred ancestral fire. This flame is the physical anchor of the community's collective memory. Tended continuously by a designated senior woman, the fire is older than the oldest living resident. Her role as firekeeper requires constant vigilance, as the flame must never be allowed to die. When severe drought forces the village to relocate, the embers are transferred to a portable clay vessel, allowing the spiritual lineage to travel across the arid plains intact. The rising smoke is a direct channel of communication, carrying daily prayers to Mukuru, the supreme ancestor. While the Okuruwo coordinates the spiritual world, cattle govern the material one. Herds are the primary measure of individual wealth and community status, with every animal's lineage deeply understood. Daily life moves to a rhythm of gendered responsibility. Women perform the intensive physical labor of raising crops and tending livestock, while men hold political authority within the OTJI, the elder council that resolves local disputes. Yet, the geography that protected this social order for generations is rapidly tightening. Private ranches have begun expanding into ancestral grazing corridors, a shift documented by land rights monitors. In 2023, the Namibian Ministry of Mines approved a uranium exploration lease adjacent to the Kunini River, raising immediate concerns over water contamination. As mining roads cut through the dry bush, the community finds itself navigating an encroaching border of concessions and fences, threatening the very pastures that keep their cattle and their sacred fire alive. The Kalahari Desert, a vast sand-filled basin stretching across Botswana and Namibia, forms the ancestral homeland of the San. This arid environment holds the biological and cultural heritage of one of humanity's oldest lineages. Genetic and genomic studies suggest that the ancestors of modern San diverge from a common ancestral human population more than 150,000 years ago, representing one of the earliest branching lineages in the human evolutionary tree. Before the Bantu expansion reorganized the continent's demography, roughly 3,000 years ago, the San were the primary inhabitants across much of sub-Saharan Africa, foraging across vast grasslands and savannas. Over historical epochs, migratory waves and agricultural settlements narrowed their physical territory, concentrating their populations in the dry interior of the Kalahari. Yet their presence remained permanently etched into the geology of the continent. This enduring presence is preserved in genetic markers and in stone. Across thousands of sandstone overhangs and cave sites, including the sacred Sodilo Hills of northern Botswana, the San maintained a continuous rock art tradition spanning more than 27,000 years. Utilizing mineral pigments of red and yellow ochre, mixed with charcoal, animal blood, and egg white binders, artists documented their cosmology, hunts, ceremonies, and eventually, their early encounters with other pastoralist groups. These ancient panels form a continuous material archive rather than silent relics of a vanished past. They testify to a cultural continuum that survived dramatic climatic shifts, structural displacement, and the rise of agricultural societies, maintaining an unbroken relationship with the land across millennia. The living breath of the San is carried in speech. Their click languages, such as Wat Xu with up to 120 distinct phonemic sounds, are among the most phonetically complex systems on Earth. These precise articulations, dental, lateral, alveolar, and palatal clicks, rely on subtle, rapid movements of the tongue and throat that non-native speakers find almost impossible to replicate. This speech is a highly specialized oral technology, shaped over millennia by the acoustics of the dry bush. This vocal complexity intensifies during the Eland Bull Dance, the community's most sacred trance-healing ceremony. As women clap interlocking polyrhythms and sing repetitive chants, A healer steps into an altered state of consciousness to pull physical sickness and social friction out of the collective body. The ceremony operates as a mechanism for communal healing and conflict resolution, reinforcing an ethic that shapes every aspect of daily life. The San have no single word that translates directly to mine. Food, tools, and water are held in common, managed through shared obligation. Yet the physical space required to practice this cooperative life is rapidly tightening. Over decades, livestock expansion, commercial farms, and conservation boundaries like the Central Kalahari Game Reserve have systematically fenced the desert. Today, diamond mining concessions and agricultural borders confine families to fixed, government-provided settlements. As these fences close in, they restrict the very mobility that makes a sharing society possible, bringing this ancient social architecture to a quiet, pressing threshold. As encroachment redraws the map, these guardians of our deepest history face quiet, systemic pressure. Their displacement is our amnesia. If we allow these ancient ways of knowing the earth to fade, we lose the only mirror left to remember who we are. Thank you for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments below.